The air is thick with soot and the bitter stench of coal. You arrive at the factory gates before sunrise, your boots already damped with mud from the unpaved streets. Fog curls between the chimneys above like grey snakes, hiding the sky. You are not alone. A dozen other figures stand silently nearby. Men, women, even children, all waiting to be admitted. This is your first day. The building looms like a fortress, all brick and smoke. You clutch your coat tighter around you, though it offers little warmth. The bells chime 6, and the great iron doors creak open. Inside, it's darker still. A supervisor greets the group with a barked list of rules. No talking, no wandering. Any break in behavior means wages docked, or worse, dismissal. You nod silently with the others, not out of agreement but necessity. The floor is already slick with oil and water. Machines grind to life with groans and clatters. The noise is overwhelming, like standing beside a waterfall made of metal. Your post is assigned. Spinning. Rows of worry frames stretch down a corridor lit only by high windows covered in grime. The air is heavy with lint, and within minutes your throat itch. You're shown how to feed the thread, how to keep fingers away from the belts, and what to do if the machine jams. You're warned, don't stop it. Call for help. If your hand gets caught, he trails off, but the meaning is clear. The first hour passes slowly. The machine's rhythm becomes a kind of heartbeat. Relentless, unfeeling. You feel time in the dull ache creeping into your shoulders, not in any clock. By midday, your stomach growls. The break is 10 minutes. Your hands shake as you eat bread that's gone hard from the morning cold. No one speaks. You stare at the exit door, wondering, how long until this becomes normal? You already know the answer. Not long at all. The second day begins before your body is ready. You wake to soreness in muscles you forgot existed. Your hands are stiff, your legs ache, and your back hums with pain from the endless hours of standing. But there is no time to stretch or hesitate. The bell will ring soon, and lateness is punished more harshly than mistakes. You walk the same fog-laced streets, past rows of chimneys still belching black smoke into the sky. At the gates, the crowd is quieter today. Some faces are missing. Whether from illness or injury, you don't know. Inside, the factory air is already alive with a groan of gears and belts. You return to your post, the same machine, the same rhythm. Spin, feed, thread, twist, repeat. Time disappears. There is no morning or afternoon, only the next spool and the next. You begin to understand how people lose themselves here, how they forget the sound of their own voice, the feel of silence, the meaning of ours. The machine offers no pause. It demands total attention. You see the others, now with clearer eyes. The girl beside you, no more than 12, has a long red welt on her arm. A belt lash, perhaps, or an accident. She works in silence, her movements efficient but mechanical. The man 2 frames down coughs constantly. A dry, rattling sound that grows worse as the day drags on. No one helps. No one stops. You are learning weakness is noted, but not pitied. During the break, you sit on a crate, breathing shallowly. The walls are stained, the windows cracked. Outside, the sun tries to break through the grime but fails. Someone near you mutters, only 6 days until Sunday. It's not comfort, just measurement. A way to hold time still in a place where clocks don't seem to matter. Back at the frame, your mind begins to drift. You hum quietly, just to hear a sound that isn't made by metal. But the supervisor walks past and snaps. No noise. Work. You bite your tongue. By the end of the shift, your fingertips are raw. Your hair is dusted with lint. Your ears ring with the phantom clatter of gears. As you walk home, each step feels heavier than the last. You don't think of quitting. There is no alternative. Only tomorrow, and the day after. And the day after that. The stairs groan under your weight. They aren't steep, but they descend into darkness so complete it feels like the air thickens with every step. Your hand grazes the wall for balance. Stone, cool and slightly damp. You move slowly, carefully, as though waking something that's been asleep for too long. At the bottom, the cellar opens wide. No light, just shapes in the dim. The smell is old wood, damp cloth, and iron. Time seems slower here, like the air hasn't moved in years. You blink and let the dark adjust around you. There are crates stacked along one wall, collapsed barrels in another. An old coat hangs limply from a nail faded. You approach it, but something else catches your eye first. A table, low, wide, covered in papers yellowed to the color of bone. The ink is blurred in places, but some of it remains legible. Names, numbers, a logbook, maybe, work assignments, ages. You run your finger down the column. 12, 11, 9. So many children. One name is marked with a cross beside it. You don't know what that means, but you can guess. There's a journal, too, bound in cracked leather, pages warped. You open it carefully and find entries in a delicate hand. Someone who worked here, someone who watched. Third accident this week. Joseph's arm caught in a pulley. No one stopped the line. They brought in more girls. Say they're 12. None of them speak. If they shut us down, it'll only be for show. You close the book. It trembles slightly in your hand. From behind you, something shifts. A sound, soft, like cloth, brushing, stone. You turn quickly, but there's no one there. Only dust drifting down through a crack in the ceiling. Only stillness. But it doesn't feel empty anymore. You tuck the journal into your coat and head back up the stairs. You don't know yet what story you've stepped into, but it's waiting. Back in the light, you blink hard. The factory seems smaller now. Less like a ruin, more like a memory. You glanced again at the rusted wheel leaning outside, then toward the cottages across the square. One window glows faintly. A figure stands there, still watching. A woman, perhaps. Hard to tell through the grime-streaked glass. She doesn't move, just stands behind the curtain, half-shadowed, as if unsure whether you're real or not. You lift a hand. A small gesture. She doesn't respond. Only lowers the curtain. You walk toward the cottages, boots crunching over gravel and frost. The air smells faintly of peat smoke and old bread. No birdsong, no voices. The cottage with a lit window has a plaque near the door, faded and cracked. No. For workers. Lodging. 1841. You knock. Gently. No answer. You try the handle. It turns. Inside, the air is warmer. Stale, but not unpleasant. A fire has been lit, but it's mostly embers now. The room is small. Bed, table, stove, a battered kettle resting on the hearth. And in the corner, a rocking chair. Empty. There's no sign of the woman, but a cup of tea sits cooling on the table, untouched. You don't sit. Not yet. Instead, you step toward the wall above the fireplace, where an old photograph hangs behind cloudy glass. A group of workers, maybe 20, stand shoulder to shoulder outside the same factory. Some look tired, others defiant. A few even smile. You study their faces. One of them, a young girl, maybe 15, wears a scarf around her head and holds a pair of work gloves in her hands. You could swear she's the one you saw at the window. But that's impossible, isn't it? Outside, the wind shifts again, and you begin to realize, in places like this, the past is not buried. It's waiting to be seen. You sit at the edge of the bed. The cushion sinks slightly beneath you, as if remembering the weight of someone long gone. The fire crackles softly, not alive enough to warm the room, but enough to keep silence at bay. You pull the photograph from the wall. Look closer. Tiny details come into view. A frayed sleeve, the stitching on a collar, a hand resting protectively on a smaller shoulder. These weren't strangers. They were a family, of sorts, bound by circumstance, threaded together by work, by smoke, by years of endurance. You turn the photo over. Words are written on the back, faint and fading. Our last day, March 9th, walked out a strike maybe, or a protest, or something quieter. A moment when they all said enough. You wonder how long they lasted. A single week, a lifetime, and then your eyes drift to something else. A square of fabric, tucked beneath the kettle, old, singed at the edges. A patchwork, tiny pieces sewn together by hand. You recognize it, not the cloth itself, but the pattern. You've seen it before. In museums, in photographs, in stories passed down by people who never had names in textbooks. Workers who stitched their pain and memory into scraps, who told their stories with thread because no one would print them in ink. You run your fingers over the seams. Some are crooked, others nearly invisible, but every one of them holds. You think of the logbook in the cellar, of the humming voice in the factory, of the woman in the window who was and wasn't there. And it strikes you. The past doesn't need permission to stay. It lingers. It settles into walls, into fabric, into the stillness between footsteps. And no matter how long the world turns, some threads never unravel. The village is quieter than before. You notice it as you step outside the cottage. How even the wind seems hesitant. How no dog barks, no footstep echoes. It's the silence of somewhere paused in time, caught mid-breath. Across the square, the old bell tower leans just slightly. You walk toward it. Once it must have signaled the rhythm of the factory do, the start of the shift, the midday break, the end of another 12-hour grind. Now the bell hangs, crooked in its frame, green with rust, its rope long gone. You step inside the tower base. Dust coats everything. Floorboards, stone corners, the iron rungs of a ladder disappearing into darkness above. There's something sacred about the place, though it's not a church, more like a memory hall, echoing with a sound no one's heard in generations. A small box rests on a ledge near the door. Inside, chalk, a crumbling stub of candle, and a folded scrap of paper. You open it carefully. The writing is uneven, rushed. We rang it once. Just once. The day they tried to shut us in, and we didn't stop. Let the next two come. No. We were here. You stare at the words for a long time. They aren't polished. They aren't poetry. They are truth. A declaration scrawled in fear and defiance. Proof that someone, once, had the courage to speak when their voices were being erased. You place the paper back, gently, climb partway up the ladder, touch the bell's cold rim. It doesn't move. It doesn't need to, because some bells don't have to ring to be heard, not when the silence they leave behind is louder than metal ever was. You leave the bell tower slowly. The square feels colder now, the light dimmer, not because the sun has shifted, but because your understanding has. You begin to see the village differently, not just as a place that was, but as a place that remembers. You follow the old road east. It curves behind the cottages and leads through what must have once been the workers' garden, little more than dry soil and weeds now. Beyond it, the remains of the dye house crouch low in the grass, its chimney shattered but still towering. A scorched scent lingers in the air. Even after all these years, the dye vats are empty, crusted with age. Shattered glass crunches under your heel. A rusted pipe juts from the ground like a broken limb. You imagine what it looked like once. Steam pouring from vents, cloth hung on lines, workers elbow-deep in vats of indigo and crimson. But it's the walls that stop you, charred, split, blackened as though kissed by flame and never forgiven. And someone has written across the bricks, not carved, not painted, but traced in ash. This was not an accident. The words are smudged, but still legible. You stand there for a long time, the silence pressing in. A story sits just beneath the surface, of protest, of punishment, of something deliberately lost. You think of the photograph again. We walked out. Maybe this is where they tried to make an example. Burn the dye house. Silence the names. Erase the color from the cloth and from the people who made it. But ash leaves stains too. You brush your hand against the wall, and soot clings to your skin like ink. A reminder. What was done in shadow doesn't always stay hidden. Sometimes it lingers, right where history hoped you'd never look. Further down the path behind the dye house, you come across another building. Small, square, and plain. A shed, maybe, or an old records room. Its door is warped, the hinges hanging loose. A sign once hung above it, but now the letters are barely visible beneath layers of grime and time. You step inside. The light is dim, filtered through slats in the wooden walls. Dust dances lazily in the still air. It smells of mildew, ink, and paper too old to remember being touched. Shelves line the room, some bowed under the weight of books and boxes. Ledgers. You open one. The pages crackle like leaves underfoot. Rows of names, numbers, and dates stretch across the pages. Tightly packed, organized, clinical. These are not stories. These are records. You flip through them slowly. A girl named Elsie, age 10, assigned to a thread winding. A boy named Robert, age 12, dismissed for injury. Another entry, unknown, collapsed at station, removed, not treated, not remembered, just removed. You scan page after page. The pattern repeats. Too young, too many hours, too few years survived. Some entries are only initials. Some are marked with a small X. And one page, half torn, smeared with ink, simply reads, unfit for labor, no compensation given. You close the book, not out of disgust, but reverence. These pages were never meant to be read as stories. But now, in your hands, they are. Every line a life, every ink blot, a silence. You take one of the smallest books, thin, frayed, nearly crumbling, and slip it into your coat. Not to steal it, to carry it forward, because these people were more than numbers, and someone should remember that. The wind picks up as you leave the shed, rustling the weeds outside like a breath through brittle hair. You head north, toward the largest of the factory buildings, the old weaving hall. The door hangs crooked. A window has collapsed inward, spilling shards like teeth across the threshold. You step over them carefully. Inside, it's cavernous. The air is colder here, hollow. Your footsteps echo across the wooden floorboards, each creak sounding louder than it should. Most of the machines are gone, salvaged for scrap long ago. But in the far corner, something remains. A single loom, dust-covered, silent, but intact. You walk toward it slowly, as though approaching something sacred. The shuttle rests midway across the frame, as if frozen in its final motion. A strand of thread still runs through the tensioner, brittle, gray, but unbroken. You run your fingers gently across the wood. It's rough, worn smooth in places where hands once rested. The faint indentation of fingernails on the beam, where someone gripped too hard or too long. You picture it alive. The room full of sound. The clatter of wooden frames, the hiss of thread pulled tight, the shouted warnings, the muted singing of girls who learned to count time by turns and wefts. Here, in this silent hall, it's easy to imagine, because the space still remembers. A small tag hangs from the side of the loom. Faded ink reads, "Property of M. O'Connell, assigned indefinitely." You say the name aloud. It sounds right in this space. Not just a machine, not just a record, but a person, a worker, someone who bent over this loom day after day, perhaps until they couldn't anymore. And for a moment, the air feels less empty, as if someone still stands beside you, watching, waiting, not to haunt, just to be known. You step away from the loom, but you don't leave the hall just yet. Something about the space holds you. The silence here isn't empty. It's full, heavy with memory, stretched between the beams like unseen webs. You look up, and there they are. Rafters lined with stray thread. Not decoration, not forgotten debris, just remnants. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of thin, faded filaments, still caught on the beams, swaying ever so slightly when the wind slips through the cracked windows, like ghosts. They drift gently, colorless. No, but once, they might have been bright, red, blue, flax gold, whatever color the day required. You wonder how they got there. Tossed playfully in a rare moment of joy, snagged during haste, or carried by air, torn loose during some frantic shift, rising like smoke into the rafters, never retrieved. And now they stay. You find yourself tracing a finger along one of the threads, as it dips down from a post. Surprised it, docentee, crumble at your touch. There's resilience in it. Even after all these years, it holds, just like the stories here, frayed, fading, half erased, but still tethered. You think of the names in the ledger, the girl in the photo, the humming in the shadows, and you realize something. This isn't a haunted place. It's a held place, held together by those who came through it, those who endured it, and those who left something, anything, behind. And now, you're part of it too. Not because you were meant to be, but because you chose to listen, and the threads heard you. You finally step out of the weaving hall. The air hits you differently now, a little colder, a little sharper. It feels as if the village has shifted, like the buildings are leaning in just slightly, listening. You follow a narrow path to the edge of the factory yard, where a row of low brick offices still stands. One of the doors is ajar. You nudge it open. Inside, the room is neater than the rest, less weathered, less swallowed by time. A desk sits at the center, heavy, imposing, the kind meant for someone who didn't work with their hands. A man with a waistcoat and clean fingernails. A man who signed things, and left early. You circle the desk slowly. There are drawers, most stuck shut from years of damp. You manage to pry one open with a groan of warped wood. Inside, a leather-bound book. It's not like the others. No lists of wages or names or injuries. This one is written in cleaner, more careful script. Less official. It starts with a date, June 4th, 1854. They told me to burn it all. Said no one needed to know what had happened. You keep reading. The writer, a manager, perhaps, had second thoughts. Guilt bled through the pages. Descriptions of falsified ages, workers buried without record. An entire section of the factory quietly sealed off, after a fire no one spoke of. You turn another page, your breath catches. There's a diagram, a hand-drawn map of the grounds, and a narrow stair marked in red. One that leads not to the cellar you found earlier, but somewhere else, underground. You stare at the page. The ink has bled slightly, but the mark is clear, real. Your heart pounds gently, not in fear, in recognition, because history doesn't always want to be uncovered, but sometimes it leaves a key, and here in your hands, you've found it. You step back out into the yard, the map clutched carefully in your coat. The wind has picked up, clouds scuttle low across the sky. You trace your steps around the factory wall, scanning the brick, the overgrowth, the sunken ground that might conceal what you're looking for. And then you see it. Behind the boiler house, a patch of earth that dips unnaturally, covered in nettles and collapsed boards. You clear the brush slowly, your fingers stinging from the bramble. And there, beneath the boards, you find a rusted hatch, iron rings, half-buried hinges. You hesitate. There's something sacred about a door that was never meant to be opened again. Something that asks you to think twice. But you don't, because this story is waiting. You grip the handle and pull. It resists at first, the metal screaming in protest. Then it gives. The hatch swings upward, revealing a black square cut into the earth. Steps descend into darkness. Stone, narrow, slick with damp. You light the stub of candle you found in the bell tower. It glows just enough to see. The air inside is heavy, thick with cold. You descend one careful step at a time, your hand grazing the wall. Below, a long corridor stretches forward, disappearing into shadow. The silence is deeper here, not empty, watchful. Your footsteps echo softly, and the air grows colder the farther you go. The walls are rough stone, but every so often, there's a carved mark, an X, a date, a name. You reach a door at the end, wood, reinforced with rusted iron. There's no lock, just a handle, worn smooth from use. You press your palm against it, and listen. No wind, no birds, just your breath, and something else. Faint, almost imagined. The quiet rhythm of water dripping, and maybe a whisper. The door opens without sound. You expect it to groan, to resist, but it glides inward as though it has waited 4 years to swing freely again. Inside, the room is wide, low, and impossibly still. Your candle flickers in the damp air. The walls are stone, blackened in places, marked with soot, and fingerprints left behind by hands that haven't moved in lifetimes. There are bunks here, simple, narrow boards nailed into the walls, dozens of them, some still with blankets, thin, mold-eaten, but undeniably placed by someone who once needed sleep more than safety. You step forward, past crates and crates of folded cloth, a broken lantern, a child's boot, and then you see it, the chalkboard, a large one, nearly spanning the wall, still faintly covered in numbers, names, and short notes, schedules, rotations. It's a shift chart. Below it, scrolled in hurried, uneven writing. Locked in for 2 weeks. Nitrogen, monoxide. Your breath. You run your candle along the wall slowly and see tally marks carved in the stone. 5, 10. Then they trail off. One set ends abruptly with a crack in the wall, as if the carver's hand slipped and never returned. You realize what this room was. Not a shelter. A prison. Not official. Not recorded. Just a place to hide the problem. Or silence it. You swallow hard. Because what you're standing in isn't just a hidden room. It's a secret someone died to keep. A story buried not in books, but in stone and skin. You take one step back, and whisper, quietly, I see you. Because sometimes, that's the only justice time allows. You kneel by the chalkboard. The names are still there. Some smudged, others clear. First names only, or nicknames. Scrawled in different hands, some big and bold, others small and written in urgency, in fear, and maybe in hope that anyone would someday read them. You run your fingers across the board. Tilly, Bram, Josie, Finn, Ruth, beneath. Someone had drawn a simple figure. 5 small bodies holding hands. No detail, just shape and gesture. Unity, perhaps defiance. You take out the stub of chalk from your pocket. The one from the bell tower. You're not trying to be part of their story, but you are witnessing it. You turn and move carefully through the rest of the space. In one corner, there's a small makeshift altar. Nothing grand, just a few stones stacked in a careful ring. Inside it, buttons, bits of thread, a strip of faded ribbon, offerings, memorials. You place the piece of thread you took from the loom gently among them. It feels right, as if your visit has closed a loop that's been fraying for a century. Suddenly, your candle gutters. The light flickers wildly. You cup it quickly, shielding it from the draft, but then realize there is no draft. The air is perfectly still, and yet something passed through the room, a shift in weight, a hum just beyond hearing. Not cold, not frightening, almost warm, and with it, a sensation you can't name. Not presence, but permission, as if the space finally acknowledges you. You nod softly, and whisper again, this time with more certainty. I see you, I remember you, and the silence that answers feels a little less empty. You ascend the stair slowly, leaving the chamber behind. Each step feels heavier than the one before, not from exhaustion but from knowing what lay buried, knowing you now carry something that can't be left behind. The hatch creaks shut above you. The outside world greets you with sudden brightness. The clouds have parted just enough for a muted glow to fall over the yard, dull gold against brick and stone. And yet, the factory looks different now, not older, quieter. The kind of quiet that follows a story finally told. You walk slowly across the grounds, past the bell tower, past the weaving hall, toward the main gate, where iron once barred entry and exit. It stands open now, rusted, hinges wide, ivy curling up one side like a reaching hand. Beyond it lies the village, the square, the church, the old paths that lead into the hills. The world beyond this forgotten place. But you don't leave yet. You turn once more, looking back at the factory. The windows reflect nothing. The chimneys are long cold, but you feel it, unmistakably, the sense that you are not alone. That somewhere in the rafters, in the chalk marks, in the tucked-away rooms and buried ledgers, something has exhaled, not of grief, but of memory. You nod once, quietly, to no one and everyone, then step through the gate, not because the story is over, but because your part in it now belongs to the world that needs to hear it. You walk away not out of forgetting, but out of remembrance, carrying with you the thread that never broke. The path away from the factory crunches beneath your boots. The sound feels louder now, sharper somehow, after so much silence. The village watches, you go, not with eyes, but with windows that glint like memories, roofs that lean like tired shoulders. You pass the chapel. The door is closed, the bell rope frayed and forgotten, but the smell of old wax and damp wood still lingers, even from the road. You pause there, hand on the gate, not to pray, to reflect, because now you carry names, not famous ones, not kings or inventors or revolutionaries, just workers, children, mothers, strikers, the nameless, who stitched and spun and suffered, who vanished from records but left marks on stone, in soot, in silence. You think about the journal you took, the names in the ledgers. You reach the edge of the village, where the cobbles give way to grass. A hill rises gently beyond, and from its crest, you can just glimpse the factory's roof. Small now, almost delicate, like something that might fold into the earth with the next storm. But you know better. You reach into your coat and run your fingers over the spine of the ledger. You feel the weight of it, not in pounds. In truth, this is the burden of the boring historian. To sit with the uncomfortable, to cradle the forgotten, to lift voices that spoke in thread and chalk and quiet courage, and let them echo, gently, into the present. You start up the hill, not for escape, but to begin writing, because now the story lives in you, and someone, somewhere, needs to fall asleep to the sound of it. You crest the hill and turn back once more. The village lies still behind you, soot-colored rooftops, the limp weather vane, the crooked chimney that once signaled the rhythm of countless workdays. But the stillness no longer feels like absence. It feels like breath held in patience. You sit for a moment on a lichen-covered stone, the factory now no bigger than a toy model below. From this height, you can see how it was designed. Narrow streets channeling movement, workhouses placed like chess pieces, the overseer's house looming just apart. It was no accident. The factory wasn't just built from bricks. It was built to contain, but not everything stayed inside. Some of it escaped. In the stories, the scars, the whispers, in the threads carried on the coats of workers as they walked home in the dark, in the soot that blew into fields, in the names scratched into stone and hidden beneath floors. You reach into your pocket and pull out the square of patchwork you carried with you. Each piece, a fragment, a life. You smooth it across your knee and notice something you hadn't seen before. Faint embroidery on one of the edges. Tiny stitches, barely visible, but they're still here. You breathe in. A wind brushes past. Not cold, not harsh, just present, as if someone walked by without disturbing the grass. You look around. No one. Only sky. Only memory. You fold the cloth gently and tuck it back into your coat. There's no plaque to lay it on. No grave. No museum waiting for donations. But there is this place, and your presence. And that is enough. Because some legacies aren't built in stone. They're carried, and you, now, carry more than you came with. You begin your descent on the other side of the hill, the village fading behind you. The path is softer here. The grass gives beneath your steps, and the trees lean more gently overhead. There's less soot in the air, less weight, but the burden you carry hasn't lessened. It's changed. Ahead lies your next stop. The town archive, a small, weathered building tucked into a newer village that grew long after the mill fell silent. You aren't sure what you'll find there, or if they'll believe you. But you have the journal, the ledger, the names. Ink doesn't fade as easily as time pretends. The building is quiet when you arrive. Afternoon light pools in its windows. You push the door open and the bell above it jingles. Bright, almost cheerful. A woman behind the desk looks up, startled. You nod politely. She nods back. You tell her what you've found. Not everything. Not the deeper parts. Not yet. Just enough. She frowns, curious, not dismissive, and leads you to a room in the back. It smells of paper and varnish. The shelves are labeled local histories, factory records, uncatalogued. She gestures toward a table and brings out a logbook to compare. Her hands tremble slightly as she turns the pages. Your ledger matches hers. Almost. But yours has more names. More truth. She looks up, and you see it. The same thing you saw in the cottage window. The weaving hole. The chalkboard room. Recognition. Not just of facts. Of loss. She doesn't speak. Only nods. Slowly. Together, you begin transcribing the forgotten. Carefully. Deliberately. Because when fire tries to erase, ink can defy it. And when history fails, even the quietest storyteller can speak it back into being. Weeks pass. Then, a month. And one quiet morning, an envelope arrives at your door. Inside, a letter from the town archive, written in clean, formal script. We've prepared a temporary exhibit, thanks to your discovery. We thought you might want to see it. You arrive on a rainy afternoon. The sky is low. The air smells of damp leaves, and your boots leave soft prints on the museum's tile floor. They lead you to the far wing, a hallway that used to display local trade tools. But the cases now hold something else. Glass boxes with rusted scissors, wooden bobbins, a child's glove, scraps of faded cloth. And in the center, a reassembled loom. Not the one you saw, but nearly identical. Cleaned, stabilized, preserved. A small brass plaque reads, "From Mill No. 4. Belonged to M. O'Connell. Donated anonymously. But you know who brought it back." At the end of the room, they've placed your ledger behind glass. Pages open to show names, initials, smudged lines, where a hand once trembled. Below it, a digital display scrolls through the transcript. Elsie, Bram, Josie, Ruth. Their stories, once buried, now illuminated in soft museum light. Visitors pass through slowly. They whisper. They read. You step back and watch as one young girl presses her hand to the glass, eyes scanning the chalkboard sketch you copied and added to the exhibit. 5 small figures holding hands. She doesn't say anything. She just stands there, and that silence, soft, respectful, awake, is the loudest thing in the room. You don't speak either. You've said what needed saying. Now, the story belongs to them. That night, you sit by your window. Rain patters gently against the glass. A lamp glows nearby. Low, golden, steady. The ledger rests on your desk, now preserved in facsimile, its real pages safely archived a few towns over. You think of the factory, of the stairwell no one was meant to find, of names whispered only in chalk. And yet, tonight feels different. Not lighter, but settled. The kind of quiet that comes after a long conversation. After something painful is finally spoken aloud and no longer needs to be carried alone, you sip tea from a heavy mug. The steam curls upward, softening the corners of the room. A journal lies open beside you. Not the factory's yours. You've begun writing. Not an article, not a thesis. Just a story, gentle, accurate, boring, maybe, by modern standards. You write a sentence about Josie's ribbon, one about the red mark in the ledger, another about the hush in the weaving hall, and how a thread still hung between the beams after all that time. Your pen slows. You glance toward the dark beyond the glass, and for a flicker of a moment, you swear you see them. 5 faint silhouettes standing just at the edge of memory, not reaching, just being remembered. The candle gutters. You close your book, let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding, and smile, not for joy, exactly, but for completion, because now, at last, the past can sleep, and so can you. You wake early. The rain has stopped. Morning light filters softly through the curtains, pale and cold but somehow kind. Your coat still hangs by the door, damp at the hem. As you pull it on, your hand brushes something in the pocket you'd nearly forgotten. The button. Small, worn, smooth, metal, not cloth, slightly misshapen, bent just enough to suggest a story. You found it near the altar, in the hidden room, tucked beneath a ribbon and an old spool of thread. You turn it over in your fingers. It's nothing, really. Except it's not, because someone once stitched it. Someone once fastened it, or lost it, or gave it away. You tuck it back into your pocket without thinking, because this button has weight now, not in grams, but in presence. It is, perhaps, the most ordinary thing in the world, and yet it's what remains. Just like the patch of quilted cloth, just like the tally marks on stone, just like the names that linger behind glass. History is full of objects like this. Things no one meant to preserve. Scraps, remnants, fragments, but in the hands of someone who cares, they become anchors. You walk out into the morning. The street is quiet. Your breath clouds the air. The museum is still closed. The archive won't open for another hour. But the work doesn't feel urgent today, because the past is not running away. It's walking with you now, threaded into your coat, buttoned close to your heart. Later that afternoon, you return once more. Not out of obligation, out of instinct. The sky is brighter today. A strange contrast to the weight the factory once held. Birds flicker in and out of the trees. A dog barks somewhere distant, but the gate ahead remains unchanged. Tall, twisted, iron bars, curled like vines. You place your hand on it again. Cool to the touch. Familiar now. No one patrols it. No one guards the grounds. But still, it feels as though you're asking permission. You pass through. The buildings rise around you, quiet and battered. The windows still blink blankly into the world. The bell tower leans as it always has. But the silence has shifted. Not empty, not haunted. Heard you walk slowly across the courtyard, passing the weaving hall and the dye house. You pause at the place where the hatch once opened. Now carefully resealed, marked by a plain stone tablet. To those who labored here, to those who were never named, you are seen. There are flowers at its base, fresh. You smile. Someone else has come. Someone who read the names, saw the chalk, and felt what you felt. You're no longer the only one. As you turn to leave, a wind slips through the factory's broken ribs. It brushes past you with a soft hiss. Nothing dramatic, just the sound of something shifting slightly, settling, and with it, a whisper, not a word, like someone saying thank you, without lips, without language. Just presence, a nod from the past. You lower your head and nod back, and step into the sunlight. That night, sleep finds you slowly, not from restlessness, but from thought. Your body settles, but your mind lingers, not on worries, but on the echo of the loom. The whisper of chalk, the silence beneath stone. You drift gently, and in the folds of dreaming, you are back there. Not in fear, just walking. The factory stands quiet, but it's lit from within, not brightly, not unnaturally, but as if warmed by memory. You see the weaving hall aglow, the dye house pulsing faint blue, the stairwell glowing softly beneath the earth, and you are not alone. Figures walk beside you, not clearly shaped, not solid, but present. One carries a strip of cloth, another a needle, a third hums a tune you almost recognize. Half lullaby, half rhythm of labor. It doesn't feel eerie, it feels safe. You enter the weaving hall, and the loom begins to move. not by hand, not by ghost, but as if time itself has resumed a small, respectful rhythm. Thread weaves through the frame, left to right, over and under, not a finished fabric, just the beginning. You sit and watch, for what feels like hours, until the threads pause, and one figure, the smallest, steps forward. A girl you think no older than 12. She holds out her hand. You expect her to speak, but instead, she places something in your palm, a button. The same one. You nod. She nods back. And you wake. Not startled, but full. As if sleep has stitched something shut inside you. A seam repaired. A thread tied off. The room is still, but within that stillness, something hums softly. A memory. Not yours alone anymore. A week later, you return to the exhibit. Not during the day, but just as they're closing. The curator sees you through the glass and smiles. She doesn't speak, just unlocks the door and lets you in. The museum is hushed, its usual footfalls and murmurs replaced by evening stillness. You walk the familiar path, past the bobbins, past the gloves who ward the loom. The air smells faintly of old cotton and polish, comforting, almost like the cottage by the fire. You stand before the display that holds the ledger, the altar objects, and the patchwork. They've added something new. A wall of names, transcribed from the ledgers, etched into brass plates, arranged alphabetically, dozens of them, some with full names, others with only initials, but all of them present. At the bottom of the panel is an inscription, compiled from personal research by an independent historian. May these names never be forgotten again. You stand there a long time. No need to explain, no need to claim, this is not your moment. It's theirs. You take a seat on the small bench beside the display. The room dims further as the lights switch to evening mode. Warmer, gentler. A recorded voice begins reading the names softly on a loop. It's not your voice, but it doesn't need to be, because what matters is that the names are said. Again, and again. Spoken into stillness, returned to the world. You sit in the half-light and listen. Not as a visitor, not even as a historian, but simply as someone who heard the whisper and chose not to walk away. The train ride home is slow. You sit by the window, watching trees blur into twilight. Villagers flicker past like echoes. Your coat is folded on your lap. The button still sits in the pocket. Small, unremarkable, and impossibly heavy with meaning. You reach into your bag and open your journal. Its pages are full now, not polished, not for publication, just written. Written for those who never had the chance. You flip to the back, where you've made a list of the unnamed, not from the ledgers, but from your imagination. Names whispered in dreams, glimpsed in photos, felt in thread. You add one more. No context, just a name, Thomasina. Because someone, somewhere, bore that name and worked in silence. And tonight, she deserves to be written down. The train hums forward. You think of the woman at the loom, the chalked X, the cellar room, the girl in your dream. You think of the whisper at the gate and the plaque that now speaks for those who never could. You think of how history isn't grand. It's quiet. It lives in corners and cracks, in suit-submerged notes, in half-soon songs passed down with no melody. It lingers in places people call boring, and waits for someone to stop long enough to notice. That someone, for now, is you. You close your journal. The train pulls into your town. Lights blink on overhead. You step out into the night. And as the doors slide shut behind you, it feels like something else has closed too. Not an ending, but a thread finally tied. Secure. Unraveled, no longer. You walk home, not quickly, not slow, just steady, with the button in your pocket, and the story still unfolding in the mind of the boring historian.